All right, before we went for a break, I was telling you about the 1962 encounters. There were two of them. June 1st, Makerere University, and between the 11th and the 18th of December 1962 in Ghana. That is a University of Ghana in Accra, courtesy of President Kwame Nkrumah. Now, the CIA confiscated most of those archives. It was mostly politicized, the one in Makerere University on June 1st. CIA confiscated most of those archives, and they make up a big chunk of the University of Chicago's special collection art center within that country. So why do they have our art pieces? Why do they have our history within their archives? And what does that mean? Does that mean that Uganda was left with a vacuum? Well, in 1962, two major encounters happened on the continent. First June, when Makerere University hosted the Conference of African Writers of English Expression in 1962. Wallace Soyinka said the conference was the first time there was a deliberate, structured encounter among Africans. That is very key. It was such a comprehensive scale of a meeting for an older generation, Wallace Soyinka would continue to say. So we ask ourselves again, after over 58 years later, this fire, has it died? And to speak to us about this and more, we have Andrew Kagwa. He's an arts and culture journalist with the Daily Monitor. Very, very intelligent. There he is, with the face mask. Yes, and we also do have Philip Balimunsi. He is curating a workshop on reinventing visual arts in Uganda, right there. Very good morning, sir. How do you do? A very good morning, Andrew Kagwa.
Good morning.
How are you feeling today? It's a chilly Friday morning. Yes. You shouldn't dampen our hopes and resolve to conquer the day. All right, let me start with you, Philip. Tell us about this workshop on visual art. What makes it important at such an opportune time when we are grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, when the COVID-19 pandemic itself is actually bringing about immense pressure on our artists, disrupting their sanity when it comes to doing creative work?
Yeah, good morning to our viewers.
Indeed.
You know, art deals...
But in respect to social distancing, I think you can remove the face mask.
Oh, thank you so much.
I want my dear curators to see you very well and be able to know who Mr. Balimunsi is.
Art historically deals with a lot of disruptions.
Indeed. And
that's when artists really get super creative.
I like the word disruption.
And ideally, this is the moment that we have lots of scattered memories that we need to capture the remnants and get together, pull ourselves up, and sort of reinvent the story.
Someone who has read a Chinua Achebe novel knows what you're talking about. Someone who has read Ngugi wa Thiong'o knows what you're talking about. If you look at the content of these writers, you'd really see that they were trying to paint a picture either of the slave trade or either of the post-colonial era, slave trade era. You would really see that they were trying to paint a picture of what Africa was at the time and not trying to romance our past.
Yes.
Why are artists not reinventing these scenarios to paint a picture of where we are from?
I think we've never gotten an opportunity like we are right now in the pandemic. It's unfortunate that we had to rethink our past during this particular time. But this is a time where we have no disruptions from foreigners. They can't freely move in and out. So we have a better opportunity to tell our own stories from our native way, in our local way, and to our people. Remember, we are promoting local tourism and all that. Indeed. So this is the best opportunity. And we thought we needed to train our people to shape these stories. Because exhibitions are purely experiences.
Indeed.
They are traveled experiences that you put in a space, and people that cannot reach those particular destinations get an opportunity to see it in a shaped space and go through the same
through
experience.
your eyes and experience.
Yeah.
But of course, Mr. Philip Balimunsi is a curator who is working on a workshop on reinventing visual arts in Uganda. He's looking for some 8 curators, applicants. If you can come, there's a workshop between the 21st of June all the way to the 15th of July. It's a training workshop, and you'll be given some skills on how best you can use your vision to reinvent the history of Africa vis-a-vis Uganda in that regard. They are looking for passionate curators, indeed, at the Normal Gallery Art Center. We also do have Andrew Kagwa, an arts and culture journalist with the Daily Monitor. Let's talk about why reinstitutionalizing Ugandan art is very, very important now more than ever.
Okay, I think the very first thing I would say is Philip should tell people who a curator is. Like, I remember my very first experience when I was covering art and I met a curator. I had to ask them, how do they spell curator? Because I had never heard of the word. And I believe there are very many people that are watching us that do not understand who a curator is.
And the people who might not be able to recognize Andrew Kagwa with the face mask. And you can remove it in the interest of a social distance.
So I think it would be a very good thing if Philip actually explains to the viewers who a curator, who an art curator is.
Who is an art curator in this case, Mr. Philip Balimusi?
Oh, we shall begin, we shall pick it from where it originates from. It's a Greek word, and it's cura in Greek, and cura means a caretaker or someone who takes care of something. And curators traditionally were custodians of culture. They would take care of the objects, protect them, preserve, and communicate. But this has evolved over time. And by the time of Herod Zeman, it sort of evolved into something else. Today we have what we call contemporary curating, that because the world changes, this practice also changes to suit the tastes and the needs of a time. Today, it looks more at how do you communicate collections, because during the colonial times, it was about how much can we get and how much can we learn about these countries. Right now, we have the collections, but how do we communicate this to the public?
Do we have the collections?
We have the
Because we are saying the CIA confiscated most of the archives from the Makerere Conference in 1962, June.
What CIA confiscated was about the Black Office and the transition. So what they confiscated was what happened during the conference.
What do I want to understand, Philip? Why was it politicized?
This wasn't just a project for Africa.
I see.
It was a global project sponsored by the Congress for CCF, Congress for Cultural Freedom. It cut across even Europe and so on. But only that in Africa, it was only one encounter that was really, really, really structured as Wole Soyinka says. And it really pulled all the African intellectuals at the time to one country. And it was the first time for them to meet at such an encounter and passionately.
So that was the fear of the CIA, the influence of these writers on the populace. They thought maybe they would call for an uprising, reinventing Africa.
Yes, but also it was a time of getting independence and all that. And this particular conference was about negritude. It was Afrocentric. Yeah, it was about African identity. It was about restructuring what the education system was, what the fiber of a new Africa, a new independent
Pushing out the white concept and then going with the African concept, which threatened the CIA, hence the confiscation.
Exactly.
So when you say reinstitutionalizing Ugandan visual arts, what do you mean exactly, Philip?
We already stuck with these institutions, and they are formally our institutions. They are government institutions, some are private institutions.
Uganda National Cultural Center,
Uganda National Cultural Center, 1959. Normal Gallery, 1964, and became National Gallery in 1965.
Indeed.
And the building within which the gallery is housed is 1930.
I see.
And it carries on with that history. So the idea is, how do we go back to our past and pick those remnants that make sense to the current generation?
Indeed.
And we sort of communicate that, and we use it to reinvent how we tell our story. Do we want to tell it from a foreigner's perspective? Do we want to tell it from a native perspective? And the conference itself, 1962, was looking at bringing native content into the curriculum of Makerere University. And that's that's the start and the origin of how Normal Gallery comes into essence.
I understand.
And because, you know, particular things couldn't be done in a structured university, they thought we needed a space where artists that have not gone through the system can come out and tell their stories in a native way.
Andrew Kagwa is an arts and culture journalist with the Daily Monitor. We've had over 58 years since Uganda was, you know, that center of African art. What did we go wrong?
Funny thing, I was having a conversation with him before we came here.
Yes.
And one of the things I also wanted to understand, where did we go wrong?
Indeed.
And you see, it's not just about visual art. Like every now and then you hear people complaining of how we do not have a Ugandan sound. Like they keep trying to understand.
There's a missing component.
What a Ugandan sound is. Even when you see how we are telling our theater stories, you notice...
It's not really that we do not have a Ugandan sound. We have a Chiganda sound from Buganda region. You have the Bagishu have their own sound. You have the Basoga with their own sound. I don't think we do not have a Ugandan sound. It's just that it is multifaceted.
It's actually true. We have our sounds.
Yes.
But for some reason,
in plural,
when we are trying to... Most of the times when we are pushing out things, we usually...
There's no unifying factor.
Abandon many of our things and just go on with something you could say is alien.
I see what is working elsewhere, like maybe the US or Nigeria.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit.
And of course, he will also tell you, when you look at visual artists, for example,
Yes.
you will notice at the beginning you find someone has a very unique style and they paint in a certain way and everyone loves it.
Indeed.
And then for some reason they travel to a residency, they see a very good, unique artist there, and before you know, they come back and they paint like that guy. And that's losing their voice, the original voice they had.
Copy and
maybe
paste.
that voice Ugandan loved. So when you ask where we went wrong, like the various things, I think the fact that with that conference there was no conclusion, it's one of the main things. And yes, he told me earlier that Makerere School was started by individuals, by an individual. By an individual. And this individual wasn't Ugandan to begin with. So you had an art school, which probably had very many white lecturers and professors, being in a conference where you're expecting people to bring in local content, and the people you're expecting to promote or push this local content narrative are not Ugandan to begin with. There are more chances they said no or they did not really agree. So if you ask me why we went wrong, probably that was one of it. But then again, when you look at many of the students that came from Makerere, many of the prominent artists that came from Makerere at that time, you notice that many of them were not really Ugandan. Like they were from across Africa.
Yes.
And maybe that explains, if you're going to get your good African students and you expect them to tell a Ugandan narrative, there will be issues.
And there's the biggest problem right there, Philip Balimusi. The fact that, you know, our African artists cannot paint a picture of the history of this country. We have a vacuum when it comes to archives in this country. The CIA confiscated part of that, and I was reading some literature and they alluded that maybe that's the reason why our artists in this country do not know bits of their history and they cannot paint it verifiably, even through exhibition making.
I will loosely tell
The
you.
fact, we're talking about identity. If
Yeah.
I go to one exhibition hall within the United States, someone would just pinpoint and say, that is Ugandan art, without even seeing the artist. We don't have that, something that identifies Ugandan artists.
I'll first of all tell you, we have an incredible scope of history. We have a unique sort of background, and we have a multi-layered sort of narrative that we need to embrace. And the fact that we should first of all recognize that Africans and Ugandans in particular, I should say, we are so much attracted to the oral sort of communication. And the reason why you're talking about the 1962 is because it was largely dominated by poets and writers. Then you have in a little bit of broadcasters and a few visual artists.
And you could see the remnants of that conference within their works later on as they proceeded with their lives. Chinua Achebe, David Rubadiri, you had Ngugi wa Thiong'o. The novels were astronomical, I'm telling you, painting a picture of where we were coming from. But largely nowadays, you won't get any literature like that. It's usually what is happening now. They're painting maybe a romantic reality or so forth, but not where we are coming from, the hard realities.
Assuming that conference never happened, would Ngugi wa Thiong'o change his name from James Ngugi wa Thiong'o? Would Ezekiel Mfarere change his name from Ezekiel to Ezekiel Mfarere? We lack these discourses. Today, art has been delegated to rooms, but globally, at conferences, at panels, and that time...
Exchange of ideas.
Exactly. That's why in other countries, actually, in 2017, SOS University celebrated that conference. How many times have we reflected on this conference? It might be that we are talking about it for the second or third time.
Indeed.
I've only heard, I think, the presidential advisor talk about it. Who else has talked about it? Who is it?
The very first time I think I heard about it, we were talking about it together. That was the first time I was learning about it. When it comes to the public, very, very few people actually remember it or even know it happened.
And how many, even in within the university circles, can comprehensively talk about this conference? But the people are still living. We recently lost John Clark paper. We
David
Rubari
here.
also died. Elimon Njau is living. The wife Rebecca Njau is living in Nairobi. So many of them are still living, and we can still fetch the remnants of these histories and create our own history.
So imagine having such remnants or individuals who were there before in a conference in 2021, trying to appoint information and knowledge to our curators and other artists within this country and Africa as a whole. Why are we not holding another conference, the same conference that was held in 1962? But then Philip is doing something similar, a workshop, a training workshop, from the 21st all the way to the 15th of July. We would like to know how, what you are doing to correct the part where we went off the rails. Is this conference on re-institutionalizing Ugandan visual art the part where you correct this discourse?
First, I will not say I'm doing any historical sort of correctness to be
African
clear.
Discourse. To correct the African discourse.
I'm not correcting.
Yes.
I'm just bringing a new proposal.
All right.
And the new proposal solves the devastation and the dilemma that we sort of face in the arts industry. And initially, this was supposed to be a conference. But because of the pandemic, we sort of had to rethink. So it was supposed to be a conference, and we did visits. I visited Elimon Njau, and I was supposed to visit the wife, Rebecca Njau, who are looking for those people that... yes, exactly. And we're looking at how can we invite one of the writers, either Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So, but we saw because of the lockdown, you couldn't have those people. And without those people, this sort of discourse couldn't be authentic. You needed to get their emotions then and now. What is because Wole Soyinka has changed his position from what he thought in 1962 to what he thinks now. Right now he recognizes what Christopher Okibo said at that particular time. So we thought we needed such people, at least 3 or 4. Unfortunately, we lost J.P. Clark, and we worked with Asere Institute that was started in to remember Christopher Ochofu Okeke, who was a founding member for the Mbari Club. So we wanted to have some of those people. So when we failed due to the lockdown, we changed the conversation into a workshop. And we said, why don't we look at the institutionalization of first the National Gallery? How many people know the history of the National Gallery? How many know that Normal Gallery started on December 7th, 1964? How many know that the conference, the transition, had a hand in sort of running this gallery in the beginning? How many know that the first lady then, Miriam Kaloboti, was at the core of, you know, elevating this idea? How many know that Madivan was at the core? So where did we lose all these sponsors and these passionate people?
Yet the structures are still here.
And how many people even know its role?
Exactly.
Yes.
And how many know that this institution became a national gallery in 1965? And we occupied the building. We occupied the building on October 1965.
So what we want to know, Philip, is that despite the prevalence or the existence of these structures, art has not skyrocketed to those heights where we want it to be. The fact that Africans are not coming up with content that is done by African researchers for Africans as a whole before it gets to the whole world. It looks like they first look at the international world where the money is, then they come back to the locals, which are us.
First, it goes back to that conference because the content we were producing at that particular time, we were producing it for a particular audience, which was because we thought it is the audience that had money. And we haven't changed the curriculum to date. And so you produce artists that are taught formal conventional systems of making art. And galleries haven't come up. These institutions haven't come up to change the narrative because the art cycle has 2 major processes. You have the production phase, which is the training institutions and all that. Then you have the delivery phase, which is the galleries, the museums, the display spaces that communicate. When you go to the studio, you've missed the link. You'll never understand what the artist is doing. But when you come to the gallery, we do the space design to give you that orientation and that space sort of thinking, and also we create that emotional sort of put the emotions in space. So the delivery phase has been lacking. Every time we talk about art, we talk about universities, tertiary institutions, and the training institutions. That's only production. And since 1937, we have the oldest art school in Africa, Makerere Art School, Margaret Trowell. Since 1937, we've been producing artists. I can tell you we have lots of artists. We have lots of artists in the diaspora. We have lots of artists here. What we haven't created for them is the stage to tell their story. They have their stories, but they're in studios. So our duty as the galleries and institutions is to decipher these stories to the local audience. And this conference is, this workshop is going to train people. How do you decipher these narratives to make sense to the local audience?
Indeed.
Because we have a huge collection at the Ugandan National Museum.
All right.
But the question is, how many know this collection? How many understand? How many appreciate it? It's our local collection. But so the duty of curators and this particular workshop is to orient these administrators of these institutions on how to communicate. Because today we've moved away from collecting, preserving, we've elevated to education, and now the biggest thing is communication. The next step is digital literacy.
Telling stories through exhibition making. Andrew Kagwa, we do have the art. We do have the art. We do have the collections, but do we have the market?
Okay, it goes back to, there was something you said which feeds into that.
Yes.
You're asking why we've not had other conferences after that first one happened. But you see, still, when you look at the fact that when this happened, many of the people that were running our gallery, not just the gallery, the people that were running our art school were not Ugandans and were not from Uganda. You could get to understand who used to see our art, like when it used to happen at normal gallery. I do not think many of those people that used to see our art were Ugandans. And because of that, I imagine maybe that's the time where the narrative grew, or that's why we developed a culture that Ugandans are not going to consume this. It's going to be consumed by people that are not from here. And for all that time, and I think up to, not even thinking, it's right up to now, most people believe that the people that are going to buy your art are not going to be Ugandans. You will even go to galleries and people will tell you directly that Ugandans do not understand art or do not appreciate art in that way. And there is a fight we've had with Philip for a very long time when it comes to pricing, that it's so bad that you will walk through galleries in Kampala, the few ones we have, and you will not find one where art is priced in Ugandan currency. Like you find it in dollars, you have an option for pounds, but there will not be shillings.
Meaning the target audience are the foreigners, not even the Africans. So how are they coming up with content for Africans and then pricing us in dollars? It means they're targeting the other part.
Which I think is one of the main purposes of this workshop.
Indeed.
Like,
who is your target audience? We need to reinvent
who is your
the
target
imaginations
audience,
of our artists.
But again, teaching a Ugandan artist how to communicate to a Ugandan, because the Ugandans, they are not communicating with, are going to China and then they are buying bad art from China. At times these are prints, and they are paying the money they would have paid to a Ugandan artist to actually buy better quality work.
So, Andrew Kagwa, what's the way forward? Our galleries were already struggling to get people inside the door. Now we are coming up with this workshop, or we are coming up with, strategies through which we could attract other Ugandans to these galleries. How will we be able to increase those numbers?
I think right now, since we've had COVID, and because one of the things COVID took away was interaction, and we used to go to the galleries, one, to interact, to meet new people, meet new artists. Without art exhibitions happening, the ones that used to bring in a lot of the collectors who are mostly foreign, I think the new strategy should be trying to tap into the local audience I mean, since tourism is already doing it, because tourism also had their issues. They used to price in dollars and people shunned it. But when you see how it's picking up right now with local people visiting these places, I think art is also one of those things that can try to pick into it.
And this is Morning at NTV. We do have Andrew Kagwa, an arts and culture journalist with the Daily Monitor, and Philip Barimusi is looking for 8 potential curators who can actually get engaged in this workshop that is going to be running from the 21st of June this month all the way to the 15th of July, that is next month. So what criteria do you need? Yes, Barimusi is going to be acquainting us. Please continue with that conversation. What do they need?
We sent out a call for application, which is more of a process that we use to, an open call. So whoever would read the requirements, they would see that they qualify. What we needed in March was an experience in working with art or at exhibitions. So you must have been part of 1 or 2 exhibitions, organizing or participating. Then we categorized if you are an art journalist, you could qualify. If you are
Andrew Kagwa.
yes, so Andrew Kagwa would qualify. Then if you are you're an artist trained, you have a background in art, architects and so on. So we sort of opened it up because it takes up lots of stakeholders. It's a broad sort of conversation. Then the applications ended on 12, ended on 12 this month. Then we have we have partners. Our main sponsor is Newcastle University. It's organized by Uganda National Culture Center, which is mandated in this country to preserve, promote and popularize culture throughout the country. And we have institutional partners, including Makerere Art School. That's why you went back into the 1962.
Indeed.
We connect quite a lot. And then we have 32 Degrees East. So we used our partners to do the selection. So the team from Normal Gallery and Uganda National Culture Center selected 8 participants. The team from 32 Degrees East selected 8 participants. The team from Makerere University selected 8 participants. Then those selections were put together and we got 8 participants. So those 8 participants will be facilitated throughout the 3 weeks, and whether Zoom, they will be facilitated via Zoom. They will get a trainer's kit, and also the facilitators will get a trainer's kit, a training kit. The training kit comes with information you need to read about in terms of curating and the basics. But also it comes with a booklet of the facilitators and why this conference and why this workshop and why you should be part of it. It also comes with goodies like a branded notebook, a bag. Since we're in some sort of a lockdown and in a pandemic, it also comes with a mask. So participants will get 2 masks for their safety reasons. You wash one, you iron and use the other. It comes with a branded pen, so that you identify this pen from the rest of the pens that the audience uses. If you're at an office, you can strictly have your pen structured to you alone, shaped for you. So that's how we've gone through it. And we've had a technical team of advisors from Makerere University. Dr. Tibayingana Anthony, he's from the economics department at Makerere University. We've had Dr. Lydia Nabulime from Margaret Trowell, a lecturer from Margaret Trowell School of Industrial and Fine Arts. We've had another technical team from Newcastle, UK. So we've been doing a lot of Zoom, checking here and there, and fine-tuning the concept and the entire process. Yes.
We also do know, Philip Barimusi, that the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought untold suffering when it comes to many members or sections of the public. But then on the artists, yes, their sanity has been affected so much. So talk to us about that dire situation. How has it been compounded during this COVID-19 pandemic? The sanity of the creative artists.
It is immense. It is devastating. I've been there. I'm an artist. I've felt their pain. I've felt their struggles. I've felt the injury. I've been bruised. And I know what it takes. I work with these artists on a daily basis. I visit their studios. I exhibit their works. I make sales for them. And it's quite frustrating for you to spend a whole year without giving a call to an artist to tell him you have something. You wonder, how do they survive? You wonder how, you wonder, this is their job. They wake up every day to go to their studio to sort of produce. But if they are not making sales, you wonder how they do survive. But however, there is some hope at the end of the tunnel. Government brought in a stimulus to sort of facilitate some of these artists, but it's more to institutionalize their structures, because it's really, really difficult to fund artists that are unmapped. Before you know it, you're funding this one, you know, in the mainstream, there's another one who is self-taught in the village.
Who needs the help
exactly,
more?
Who needs the help more? So the first step has been, and is, headed by Uganda National Culture Center and the art associations and organizations, is one, to first of all identify who an artist is. In the visual arts, we've told them, we define an artist by so many terms. You can't be educated with a certificate. We can identify you by audience recognition. If people recognize you and they say, you're an artist, you're amazing, you paint, you can be identified by your portfolio. You can be identified by experience and collection. You can be identified by exhibitions. So that's how galleries come into play. So when that is done, of course, the institutions will communicate. I'm not the PR for Uganda National Culture Center. I'll not go deep into that. But at least there is that government has given that that sort of listening ear to the artists. I know it's not enough for now, but we only still have to lobby for more and more. And such workshops are here to first of all put up a conversation. Because the visual artists haven't been on TV to complain. They haven't rioted. They haven't rebelled. But they're hurt inside, and they're really bleeding. But because we keep constant check, and because the visual art has structures, they know where to go. If I have a problem as an artist, they know they have an association, they have these galleries that make sales for them. So we really have that well-structured sort of industry.
Indeed. And
that's why you haven't seen them a lot, but they are really bleeding.
Andrew Kagwa, in your own perspective, how has this COVID-19 pandemic marred the sanity of our artists?
Yes, that okay. One thing I would like to say on Roy was, I think one of the things that COVID-19 should start, it should start the conversation of documenting ourselves. And when I talk about documenting, like, we need to go as far as auditing ourselves. Like, I noticed it was very easy for farmers to come out and say, we've lost this much and we need maybe a stimulus package of this much because we've lost this much. Yes. And most of the time, as a journalist, I can tell you that I've struggled to sell art to the people that are running newsrooms. Because when you're trying to sell art, they do not see the need, they do not see the economic benefit of it, and they do not see how art is helping this industry or helping Uganda at large. So I imagine now that COVID has come and people had to literally pitch for themselves, this should be a good chance for us to start thinking about talking about art in an economic way. Let's talk economic, like the creative economy when you are talking now, that we tell people the industry has been bringing in this number of people to simply buy art. You know, there are people that come here to collect art.
Indeed.
Like, the only reason they are coming to Uganda, they are boarding a plane, is to come, look at an exhibition, buy art, and leave. There are those people, but the numbers are not known. We do not know how much art is contributing to the country or the economy. So I think this economy, this pandemic, should start that narrative of, this is how much you contribute. You should be taking note that we exist.
All right. When you look back at Makerere University of 1962, Andrew Kagwa, you might not have been there, but don't you get a feeling of nostalgia that and a feeling of a missed opportunity for what could have been?
I was, okay, truth is I wasn't there, but I was very lucky in 2017?
Yes.
There was something that we were doing with a couple of friends. We would get an artwork and then we would talk about it. Like, most of the artworks we ended up talking about were people that passed on. There were those that were still alive. Like that's when I was shocked that Reverend Sempanji, Kefa Sempanji, used to paint. He's an art. I don't know if he still paints.
He's an artist,
but he's an artist because his works was one of the works we talked about. I think we've had amazing artists, and more so we've had amazing artists come out of Makerere University. I cannot even tell where we missed the opportunity from. But somehow we missed the opportunity.
Indeed.
But we have amazing artists. Like the other time there was...
They just need some kind of support and to be pointed in the right direction.
Like we need to talk about these things more.
You don't see the African writers like Ngugi wa Thiong'o anymore.
Like the other time there was an art piece that was damaged at the museum. Walumbe was damaged at the museum, and I remember trying to tell people how this was a very big deal, and you could just imagine the stares, like, so what? Like, why is it a big deal? Like, very many people couldn't understand how historical that work is. It's a good thing, actually, it got fixed. But, but anyway, you just see...
It actually got another layer to the story.
but Andrew, is it possible to have a slew of artists who only focus on creating African content by African researchers or writers for an African, group or audience that is only African? Do we have such artists who are so bold to say, I'm going for the shillings, I'm not going for the dollars?
I think when it comes to the African story, many people are telling the African story, but the context of telling the African story,
it's being romanced.
There was a situation among writers in the early 2000s where African-based writers had issues with the privileged, like I would say, European-based African writers who happened to be telling an African story in a context of, is it what they call poverty porn? But it gets to sell them really well, and they make a lot of names. And yet many of these people that were writing this this poverty porn about Africa, many of them had actually not lived in Africa or even stayed in Africa for a day.
Can you imagine?
So the story is being told, but the context of the story that's being told, I think, is why the problem is.
They're not painting the real picture of the ugly past Africa has actually endured over the years. Now, Philip Balimusi, one of the objectives of this main conversation has been for us to reimagine the future of the museums and the galleries. Of course, we are living in the COVID-19 pandemic, and this conversation couldn't have been so timely. So how do you intend to make this happen? How does the future of the museum and the galleries actually look like right here in Uganda?
We need to strike a compromise between digital and physicality.
I hear you.
And in visual, really physicality means a lot. And the compromise should be, even though we are thinking digital, not everything can be digitized. Things like emotions, ethics, things like creativity cannot be digitized. So we need to promote those cores as we we cannot avoid digitization, but we need to tell our artists that even though you go to the digital platforms, they're simply delivery channels. They're not creating channels. They simply facilitate you to create. So we need to, one, focus on that. The moment we grab that with both hands, then we can rethink of how do we go digital and how do we sort of transform from that level to but also we need to facilitate our artists with IT.
Indeed.
We need to teach them
technological know-how.
Yeah, exactly. We need to orient them through how to use technology. We need to sort of enforce collaborations. Art doesn't work only with artists. I need a journalist. I need you. I need a business person to market the work. And
Philip Balimusi, thank you very much for that humble submission. Yes, also Andrew Kagwana, and culture journalist, thank you very much for having made the time to speak to us right here on Morning at NTV. Speaking about the digital residents, we do have some of them, and they've been largely following this conversation online. Aaron Uringtho is saying you have the mandate to regulate the prices of the art, number one. You can do better than this. Jimmy Barasa, Yes, Jimmy Barasaya is saying, unbelievable, may God help. Sebi Diginya, Stuart Bobby is saying to me, I think it's not hospitals that are hiking prices, but vaccine affordability. All right, the health minister designate, that is Dr. Ruth Cheng, has asked private hospitals that are hiking the cost of oxygen to apologize. This is not the time to make money. This is the time to save lives. I repeat, the health minister designate Dr. Ruth Cheng has asked private hospitals that are hiking the cost of oxygen to apologize. This is not the time to make money. This is a time to save lives. Now, I have some of those responses from Twitter. Remember, one oxygen tank is going from 800,000 Uganda shillings. So if you need 2 of them, that is 1.6 million. Aaron Orengtho is saying you have the mandate to regulate the prices. You can do better than this. Jimmy Barasa is saying unbelievable. May God help. Stuart Bob is saying to me, I think it's not hospitals that are hiking prices, but the affordability, demand, and availability in the vaccines. Affordability and demand. That's what he's talking about. You'll give in 1 million because that's the maximum you can afford, and somewhere else you'll come in need of the very cylinder, and you'll need 5 million. So meaning between 1 and 5 million, that's the charge. Namaloki Christian is saying, but you made money in the first phase. How do you think they will listen to you when you fail to do the upstanding thing the first time? Badidu Patel is saying the NRM, the corruption fight starts here. Will I allow my person to die because I do not have hospital payments, yet I control government accounts? I'll dip my... Wow. The people are actually angry that the Ministry of Health has not regulated the prices of oxygen, and the private health facilities have actually continued to set the prices for themselves. My name is Romeo Bisik, and of course, this is the number of show that brings you first-hand information, and we've largely come to an end. Let's meet again on Monday, same time. Have yourselves a blessed morning. Don't forget your face mask.